Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video with myself today. A transfer rumor. The transfer rumor windmill is happening already, and it looks like we might be making a move for a striker in January. Serhou Guirassy, probably butchered the name, but he's absolutely flying, killing it in the Bundesliga this season. 27 years old, 6'2". Lots of key traits that we're going to get into and break down with the analysis as we normally do with the data. But it's been said by X that we are in talks with him. Tim Steiner's been doing some stuff behind the scenes, and he only has a 15 million release clause, which is massive, which also makes it very tough. There's going to be a lot of competition for his signature, but at 15 million pounds, if we can shift on someone like Danny Ings and bring him in January, even though Guirassy is going to be away at AFCON for most of January, it's still a good move. A touch wood, he doesn't sign and then get injured at AFCON. That'd probably be the most West Ham thing, but let's break down his stats and how he's got to such a high scoring season this year in the Bundesliga, because it didn't start off that way. He's obviously been around for a while now, 27 years old, like I mentioned, and you can see here the breakdown of his goals and assists return for the last few seasons. As you can see here, 14 games in the Bundesliga so far this year, 17 goals and 1 assist. I mean, he's been in such good goal scoring form. Started off really, really hot in the start of the season, kind of cooled off a little bit throughout November, but nonetheless, those statistics are incredible. And even if you look at it last season, 11 goals from 22 games for Stuttgart, which is a decent return. One every 2 games. It's not a bad return at all for a striker. Before that, obviously at Rennes, you can see he kind of struggled, didn't really play in 22-23 season. Before that, managed 9 goals from 37 games. So he's never really been as prolific as he has been this season. He's kind of put himself on the map under a new manager this year, and they're just playing to his strengths. And those strengths I wanted to mention, big, physical, 6'2", is quick. I think he's topped around 33 kilometers per hour speed this season for one of his sprints, which is insane for the size he is at 6'2". But his main kind of characteristics are his hold-up play, his linking. He likes to link with other players. And you can imagine that if we have him up top and the likes of Paqueta, Kudus, and Bowen feeding off of him, such a difference to that attack. And it just offers us a little bit more physicality up top, which Bowen sometimes lacks. I think his aerial play is a bit underrated. But obviously, Guirassy is a different level, and he's an out-and-out striker, and he's scoring goals. And it's something we've just wanted for so long at West Ham, isn't it? A goal-scoring striker who fits the system. Well, this is a person who definitely fits the system, especially with the players we have around him. The only reservation I have is how good he would be in a counter-attacking side like us with, most matches we are pretty low on the possession stats. Whether he'd become an isolated figure, that remains to be seen. But I have no doubt his link-up play is excellent. He's obviously quick as well, so he can turn a defender, but he doesn't really progress with the ball himself. That's not his strength, but he brings others into play. And, if you've got Kudus, Bowen, Paqueta firing off of Guirassy, that's a very, very good front four. And it gives you a different option as well for David Moyes if he's, become so reliant on Jared Bowen at the moment, with Antonio out injured for so long. Danny Ings as well, not performing. Mubama, another one he doesn't quite trust, isn't quite ready yet for the Premier League. So let's break down the statistics a little bit more for his data this season, just so you can get a bit more of a clear understanding as to how he is playing. So this data compares, himself to other strikers in the top 5 leagues, and obviously the Champions League and Europa League as well over the last year. And it's based on 1,920 minutes played that he's managed in that time. And you can see the percentiles he falls into. So look at the top one there, non-penalty goals, 99th percentile. I mean, that speaks for itself. His non-penalty XG is very high. 0.73 XG per 90. That's very, very good return. He's getting into positions where he needs to be clinical, and he has been clinical, which is why he's scored the goals he has this season. Averaging 3.4 shots per game. His assists could be higher. He doesn't really get many assists at all. I think he's got 1 this season. But it's more his build-up play in the lead up to that, which is, the pre-assist that doesn't get counted on the stats. And, what he's been is a goal scorer. You can see from those top stats there, he's a goal scorer. That is what Guirassy has been this season, and is exactly what we need going into the second half of the campaign, because we just can't afford to lose anyone now. If Bowen gets injured and Kudus is out for, AFCON, and Paqueta picks up another injury, we're stuck with a very flat front three. And we saw against Brighton, the difference in quality drops quite significantly. So if we want to be serious about competing for the top 6, top 7 again this year, and also compete in Europa League latter stages of the knockouts, we have to recruit in January, especially going forwards with a striker. I think that would be a massive coup for the club if we can get that over the line, especially as he's only 27 years old. He's really starting to find his feet, as I mentioned, in a team that's now playing to his strengths. And, we'd absolutely be able to do that at West Ham. So let's take a look back, a look back. As I mentioned there, he's not really a progressor. You see in kind of the middle there, progressive passes, 1.73 per match, carries, 1 a match. He's not really going to be taking on people. He falls quite in the lower percentile for that. But his passing's good. Technically, he's a very good player, good with both feet, high up in the pass completion rate compared to other strikers in the top 5 leagues. And, he 27 passes for a striker isn't too bad. Isn't too bad at all. Obviously, you can see at the bottom as well, like the aerials one could be better. But again, this is quite a generic stat, so I wouldn't look too much into it. But the main thing is the top one, non-penalty goals. He's not even a penalty taker, and he's fallen into that top bracket. And what you want from a striker is exactly what these statistics are showing. Obviously, you'd want something maybe a little bit different at times if you want to be versatile, but that's when you can switch it up yourself if you're Moyes. You can then put Bowen back up as striker, or, Kudus can go up there. Paqueta can play as the number 9 and hold up and link play. That's what Guirassy would do. You imagine Paqueta when he goes up front and you have kind of Bowen, Kudus, if someone like Ben Rama or Fornals at the moment is feeding off of that, it seems to work pretty well. It's actually worked a couple of times for Moyes when he's tweaked it. Guirassy is quite similar, I would say, to how Paqueta would play as a 9. His hold-up play is very good. He's strong on the ball, good in the air. That kind of typical number 9 that you'd expect. You'd expect a good team to have if they, want to get players in and around the box. And I think that's the big thing this season for Guirassy. It is a big talking point. His clinicalness in front of goal has just gone up an absolute another level. Whether he can maintain that remains to be seen. As I mentioned, his goals did drop off a little bit in November. I think he's only scored 3 goals since then, but it's still a decent return. I think it was 6 or 7 games in that period. So he's not scoring. It's just he was absolutely on fire at the start of the season. So yeah, it's an interesting move. I think for £15 million, it's going to be very, very difficult to do if you're Tim Steiden. And it's probably why he's been working on it a while behind the scenes to try and get this set up for either January or the summer. My preference is to get this done in January so he can make an impact straight away. And, all it takes is for him to stay at Stuttgart this season and score another 17, 18 goals in the second half of the season. Suddenly you've got some very big clubs looking at him based on that return. So not only is this a potential bargain, it's a gamble that I'm absolutely willing to risk on. If you look at the other options we currently have, as I mentioned, Danny Ings, Antonio, Cornet, Mubama, these aren't players that are scoring. They're not prolific and they don't all fit the system. So, we do need to recoup some of that attacking threat from the bench in our squad. However Moyes wants to set this team up, it needs to be there if we're serious about Europa and Premier League. Because as I mentioned, that Brighton game just highlighted to me that we are not ready to compete on all cylinders because we just don't have the squad depth. And we're going to tire like we did in the Europa when we got to the Europa League semi-final. We just couldn't rotate, and that was our downfall in the end. We didn't make moves in January. I hope we learn our lesson this time. It's rumored that we're kind of the 1 out, 1 in policy. So there's not too many funds available. But for £15 million, you shift Danny Ings on loan with an option to buy. That covers that. His wages won't be nowhere near as high as Danny Ings. So we're also selling Tilo Kehrer for 10 million. So there's money coming in. We now have to recruit correctly and make sure we get it right, because for £15 million, it's definitely a move that I would be pushing for. And I'm sure that other guys at Bablin are in agreement as well. So let me know what you think about Guirassy. Is it a move you'd like to see? Is it something that's maybe a little bit risky? Is he a player that just hit a bit of a purple patch and now starting to fizzle out a bit? He's obviously got AFCON as well. So could that affect things going into the second half of the season? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy the analysis. Appreciate all of the support on the videos going forwards. And until next time, come on, you Irons.